idea I'm going to tell you now works better in Chutz La'aretz, not here, but I still think it's a valid point. And that is that connecting Vayigash to Channukah. There's a custom, even though of course there's no source for this per se, but there's a custom that to play Dreidel on Channukah, even though there's no halach and Shulchan Aruch, but obviously every minig Yisrael is Torah, is kadosh. We're familiar with the classic reason that's given, that in the times of the Yevonim and the times of the Greek, one of the things that they prohibited was limud Torah, was Torah study. Of course, we know that back then Torah Sheba'al Peh was not written down yet. It had to be taught and studied in group format, and so therefore there was always a risk, right? We know that much to the Jews' credit, they did not stop learning Torah, and of course we know that there's midrashim or there's stories that are said. They would bring these dreidels, these tops, these toys, and they would bring that with them into the cave, wherever it was that they were learning, and they were learning Torah. And if, like Chas v'Shalom, a spy, a Greek spy would come in and look to see what they were doing, they would quickly stop learning, and they would start spinning these dreidels. And so therefore the dreidel actually represents the idea that they didn't give in and surrender to the Gezeira of Talmud Torah. And why do I say that what I'm about to tell you works better in Chutz La'aretz? Because I remember reading in an interesting book that had some Sisrei Torah mixed throughout. There's a book about Channukah that was written by a deep thinker, and he wrote something that sounds almost like Purim Torah. But it says in the pasuk over here, it says, "Es Yehuda shalach lefanav el Yosef, lahorot lefanav Goshna, vayavo arta Goshen." At the end of Vayigash, Yaakov Avinu becomes aware that he's going to have to come down to Egypt, and he knows there's a prophecy that they're going to be there for 400 years. So he says, "How are my children going to survive in Galut, in the Galus of Mitzrayim?" So he says he sends Yehuda ahead of the pack, lahorot lefanav Goshna, to instruct Yosef that he should give them Goshen, which that'll be like the Jewish enclave, far away from the metropolis of Egypt, where hopefully they'll be able to live a hermetically sealed Jewish life. But the word, so Rashi says over here, lahoret lefanav, lefanot lo makom lahoret hechis yashabo. So Yehuda was sent by Yaakov to instruct to Yosef to clear away an area for the Jewish neighborhood and how to do it. And then Rashi brings the Medrash. Umedrash agada lahoret lefanav litaken lo beit Talmud shemisham teitze hora. So lahorot is not implying that Yaakov is sending Yehuda to instruct Yosef what to do, but rather to set up a beit midrash in Goshen. So in this book, they say that the letters Goshna correspond to the Gimel, the Shin, the Nun, and the Hey, which is on a dreidel in Chutz La'aretz. Nes gadol hayasham. So you have the Gimel, the Shin, the Nun, and the Hey. So again, it doesn't work well with the Sivivon in Eretz Yisrael, but the Sivivon in Chutz La'aretz spells out the word Goshna. And if you're going to say that the dreidel, that the Sivivon symbolizes their unrelenting pursuit to learn Torah in the darkest of times, that's exactly what Yaakov was sending Yehuda in order to do. They're about to enter the darkest of times, Mitzrayim, the Galus of Egypt. And Yaakov knows that the success and the survival of the Jewish people in the darkness of Galus is only through Limud Torah. It's only to the degree that they will be able to continue learning Torah in the darkness. That's going to give them the light. That's going to pave the way so that they don't assimilate, so that they'll be able to hold on to their Jewish identity. So therefore, Goshna and the dreidel are very much intertwined. Again, Goshna, Goshen, symbolizes Talmud Torah, and the dreidel, which again in Chutz La'aretz, the dreidel had the letters Goshna on it also. So it's interesting that Rav Galinsky actually says, we know that the two rabbinic chagim that we actually celebrate to commemorate a salvation are Purim and Channukah. Whereas there's a lot of differences, and like I think Shlomo said a couple days ago, that Purim is a salvation of the body, and Channukah is a salvation of the neshama. But Rav Galinsky actually says, interesting, he says that what the dreidel is to Purim, the Grogger, to Channukah, the Grogger is to Purim. And if you think about what are the differences between a Grogger and a dreidel, I'm not trying to dreidel your cup over here, okay? It's the grogger actually is also, it's a spinning device, but it's spun from the bottom, whereas the dreidel is a top that spins from the top. The other thing is that the grogger makes a lot of noise, and the dreidel is silent. So he says a beautiful idea. He says that on Purim, he says, Purim, there was a decree to annihilate the Jewish people. Right? It's a famous Gemara that they asked Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, or Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai asked, why did the Jews deserve destruction? But whatever it is, either because they ate from the meal of Achashverosh, or they bowed to the tzelem, to the idol, they were all decreed by HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they should be physically destroyed. And how did the Jewish people, in what merit were they able to abolish it? They had to make noise. They had to daven and cry out. So that's like the grogger. And also, it had to come from below. It had to come from, we had to make the noise and cry out to Shamayim in order to abolish the decree. And that's why Purim is represented by the grogger, which means it spins from the bottom, which means we have to spin it. We have to arouse Hashem's, we have to make a tumult in heaven. That's what Purim was, and that's why we had to make a lot of noise. That's why the grogger makes noise. He says, whereas Rav Gulinsky writes that Channukah was a decree, going all the way back to the first pasuk in the Torah. There were 4 guluses. HaKadosh Baruch Hu already decreed that the first one was Mitzrayim, the second one was Bavel, third one was Yavan Madai, and the fourth one we're still in, Edom. But he says that unlike Purim, where we had to arouse Shamayim, we didn't have to arouse Hashem to get us out of the gzeirus of the Yevanim, in terms of davening and fasting and all that stuff. Because why? Because the reason why Galus Yavan came to an end was because it was finite to begin with. It was just like the Galus of Mitzrayim was for 400 years, and Bavel was 70 years. There was a certain amount of years of Yavan, and when it's over, it's over. And that's why, who spins the Sivivon? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why it's spun from the top. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to bring the salvation of Channukah because the time was up. And we didn't have to scream and yell and daven, and that's why the Sivivon is silent. But the Sivivon does need one thing. Even when the Gullus was preordained, and its kates, its limit, the finish, the completion of it is also preordained by Hashem. Unlike Purim, where we had to arouse Hashem ourselves. In Channukah, we don't have to arouse, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even if the time limit is up, what do we say in the Haggadah? I'm jumping around. We say in the Haggadah that what? That we reached the 49th level of Tumah. Okay, the time was up. 210 years, 400 years. There's cheshbonos how we left early, we left on time. Even if you say we left on time. If you say we left on time. But what does it say? Had we fallen to the 50th level, there's a level where there's a point of no return. That if we fall too far, even if Hashem wants to take us out, and He doesn't need anything on our part. He doesn't need the grogger. He doesn't need us to daven and make a big noise. But if we're no longer Klal Yisrael, chas v'sholom, by the time the Kates arrives, and there's no one to redeem. There's one prerequisite to the Channukah salvation. We have to still be Am Yisrael. We still have to be Bnei Yisrael. And what does it mean to be Bnei Yisrael? To be connected to Torah. That's what kept the Jewish people in Mitzrayim. That's why they were worthy to be. They were still Bnei Yisrael because they were connected to Torah. That's Goshna. Why were we saved from Channukah? Because we were connected to Torah. How did we achieve that? Through the dreidel. So that if they saw us learning, we'd be able to take out our spinning tops and show them that we're not doing anything. And so therefore you see over here from the dreidel, you see also from the Parsha of Goshen, you see over here that Bez Hashem, there's going to come a time. There was a time in the other 3 Goliases, exiles. The time is over. Bez Hashem, we're hopefully reaching the Kates, the time of the ending of this 4th Golias as well. But we have to make sure that we're still Bnei Yisrael, that we're not unrecognizable to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the way that we keep ourselves in the ball game, in the Parsha, in the ballpark of being saved, is by never severing our connection to Talmud Torah. Which is why in Channukah we place an emphasis on Limud Torah, Be'ez Hashem, through the continued, never-ending, continuous learning of Am Yisrael, that allowed us to be saved throughout the times, as we say, Bayamim Ahem, Bazman Hazeh, so too we should be zoich to see Bazman Hazeh in our times as well, through this never-ending break in Torah, in Limud Torah, in Kiyum Mitzvahs, we should be zoich to be redeemed again. B'mher b'yameinu, amen.